Welcome to Making Melodies with uMelo Episode 3, where we go through the process of creating a memorable instrumental melody in a DAW piano roll, and show how we went from an empty canvas to this. First step. Get inspired. Easy. Open uMelo. One press. Done. Before we start shaping our melody, let's take a closer look at the inspiration crafted by uMelo. The inspiration comes in the form of an 8-measure melodic template that will be used as a starting guide to give our melody its initial shape. The motion component suggests that the melody should be ascending, which means the last note of the melody will end on a higher pitched note than the start note. The QLE component, quantity, length, emergence, tells us about the unique phrases contained in this melody. The quantity of unique phrases, how long they should last and how often they should play. In this case, there are 3 unique phrases, labeled P1, P2, and P3, with each lasting 2 measures in length. P1 plays 2 times in the melody, during measures 1 to 2 and 5 to 6. P2 plays once, during measures 3 to 4, and P3 also plays once during measures 7 to 8. The phrase component shows us the general melodic contour that each phrase can be expressed as. For this melody, the contour of the P1 phrase can be expressed as an inverted arch contour. P2 can be expressed as an arch contour, and P3 can be expressed as a combination of one note and descending contours. Here's an approximate overlay that represents our visual interpretation of this melodic template, which we can follow as tightly or as loosely as we want to create our melody's initial shape. We'll start by crafting up the rhythm pattern. The type of rhythm to impart will greatly depend on the character or vibe you want the melody to have. We will go for an up-tempo active vibe in this melody. Each phrase contour will have its own rhythm pattern. A rhythm pattern is an irregular succession of notes. A motif, a musical idea that has a small collection of notes, typically between 2 and 10. A motif with lots of notes can even be split into smaller groups. Rhythm patterns don't need to be complex, but if you want the melody to be interesting and noticed, you need to make them contrast from the underlying steady metrical beat of the music. You can tap them out physically or click them into the piano roll. We will click ours into the piano roll to craft up our initial rhythm patterns for this melody. Looking at the melodic template shape overlay, it looks like there could be a call and response pattern that could happen in each pair of phrases, with P1 being the call, and both P2 and P3 each being the responses. We'll try to use the same rhythm pattern for P2 and P3. Doing so would help to introduce an appealing balance of unity and variety in the melody as we use the same rhythm pattern with different contours. Okay, let's get to work. Nice. Time to shape. Pick a key. E major. OK. Now that we have our uMelo inspired melody shaped, we will work on creating the finished melody by imparting our individual artistic expression combined with some general techniques to guide us along the way. There are countless different versions that this melody could have finished as, and even then could still be revised further if needed depending on harmonic content and other elements that play along with this melody in a piece of music, or even depending on the type of role you want the melody to have. This is the version we will settle on. So now let's take a look at some of the techniques used to create this melody. We'll start by bringing it back to a pure rhythm pattern. The rhythm patterns of all the phrases in this melody are almost identical, with slight variation between them at the end of each phrase. This similarity of rhythm patterns creates unity in the melody, while each of the phrases have different melodic contours, balancing the unity with variety. The rhythmic cadence of each phrase is also the same. On the offbeat after the fourth beat in each phrase's second measure. And even though this is a metrically weak beat, the feeling of cadence can still be perceived for each phrase. There is pretty much no melodic rest for the listener in this busy tune, although the contours used by the rhythm add a good motion, propelling the melody forward into repeated plays while remaining enjoyable. It has a total of 75 notes, making it very active melody indeed. There is variety of note lengths with a good mix of quarter, eighth, 16th, and 32nd notes, making the melody interesting as it contrasts from the underlying steady beat. Now let's take a look at the melody in its finished form with the contour tones in place. The call and response patterns are a sequence that provide a sense of melodic coherence, as both the call and response incorporate the same rhythm notes but are played with different contours. P1 calls and the response from both P2 and P3 are like echoes that repeat the call but at a higher pitch. There is good use of the root and the third throughout the melody to help establish tonality. The first three phrases have cadence on the root of the scale, while the final phrase in the melody has cadence on the fourth of the scale, which is less conclusive sounding than the root, helping to propel the melody into being repeated again as it seeks resolution. It has variety in motion, containing a good mix of steps, 1 to 2 semitones, leaps, 3 or more semitones, and repeats, where the next tone is the same as the previous. To help with melodic cohesion, the pitch gap made by the leaps after P1 and in P2 are filled in with stepwise motion in later parts of the melody. And the pitch gap made by the leap in P3 is filled in with stepwise motion immediately after the leap. A chromatic note has also made its way into our melody. The note of A sharp does not fit into this E major scale, but does feel not out of place this melody, perhaps because that it is being used brief passing tone during a succession of 16th notes. This chromatic passing tone helps adds a bit of charming variety. The melodic climax, the highest note in a melody, in P3 is positioned well, as the same rhythm note of the previous response, in P2, was stepwise motion upwards of a minor second. In the second response, P3, this rhythm note is now a leap note, leap of a minor third interval, which disrupts the listener's natural expectations, eliciting a pleasant emotional response. The last note of the melody is at a higher pitch than the first note of the melody as suggested by our uMelo melodic template, which allows for an overall ascending feel of the melody. Finally, we've replaced the piano sound we've been using to create this melody with a raspy lead type sound which has an instant attack with long decay and maximum sustain. This has been a valuable exercise in creating a melody according to the melodic template crafted by uMelo. The template saved us a bunch of time and effort, allowing us to very quickly go from an empty canvas to creating a completed melody. And although we may not find use for the final melodies created in this process, it did provide great experience and practice at crafting our own melodies, and it also encouraged us to try new creative possibilities which we may not have attempted otherwise. We really hope you've been able to take something away from this episode that you can add to or expand upon in your own creative process. You can find more details about this episode listed in the video description. We'd love to see your discussion and questions in the comments section, and we'll catch you in the next one.